This is one of the most important and iconic albums in rock history, with one of the most important and iconic songs in rock history. And the story behind it is so chaotic that it didn't only change the way I hear the song, but changed the way I would hear the album for the rest of my life. There are some guitar riffs that are so iconic that you stop hearing the lyrics of a song. Smoke on the Water may be the most perfect example of this. The riff is so iconic that it is probably one of the first things that millions and millions of people ever learn on the guitar, and you're almost guaranteed to hear it when you walk into any music shop on the planet. But the lyrics underneath it are almost absurdly literal. Deep Purple really did go to Montreux on the Lake Geneva shoreline to make a record with a mobile studio. Frank Zappa really was playing at the casino. Somebody really did have a flare gun. The building really did burn to the ground, and the smoke really did drift across the water. But the part of the story I find even more incredible is that the fire was only the beginning. Because according to Ian Gillan, the song that became one of the most recognizable pieces of rock music ever recorded was written at the last minute from a throwaway jam, because Deep Purple discovered they were 7 minutes short of an album, and at almost every stage, Smoke on the Water could simply never have happened. In December 1971, Deep Purple traveled to Montreux, Switzerland to record an album that would become Machine Head. The plan was to use the Montreux casino after it closed for the winter, with the Rolling Stones mobile studio brought in for the sessions. Before Deep Purple could begin, there was one final concert at the casino, Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. Ian Gillan was there, and the description of what happened next is remarkably close to the lyric millions of people now know by heart. Gillan remembered hearing a flare gun being fired into the wooden trunking of the building. Within a short time, the casino was burning. He recalled Frank Zappa helping to keep the crowd calm, whilst the man behind the Montreux Jazz Festival helped people escape from parts of the building. Deep Purple were evacuated. Then Gillan remembers standing in a restaurant away from the casino and watching the wind coming down from the mountains push the smoke from the fire across Lake Geneva, and that image stayed with them. Smoke on the Water. Once you know that, go back and listen to the opening verse. It reads almost exactly like a diary entry. They came to Montreux to record the record. They had the mobile studio. Frank Zappa was playing. There was a flare gun. The casino burned. And Gillan later called the lyrics the biographical story of the making of Machine Head. That's what I love about this song. One of the biggest rock anthems ever written is carrying an eyewitness account of an incredibly strange few days in Switzerland. The fire created a much bigger problem though. Deep Purple had travelled to Montreux specifically because they needed somewhere to record. Now their studio had burned down before they'd even properly started. The Rolling Stones mobile studio itself survived, but the band needed another building. They eventually ended up at the Grand Hotel. Gillan remembers the technical difficulties as immense. They were effectively trying to turn spaces that weren't designed as recording studios into places where a rock band could make an album. And somehow they got most of Machine Head recorded. Most of it. Then came the last day. The engineer told them there was a problem. They were 7 minutes short of an album. And in the vinyl era, that definitely mattered. They had written and recorded songs they intended to make, but there simply wasn't enough music, so they needed another song, and they needed it within hours. Someone remembered a tape they'd made while setting up the equipment at the Grand Hotel. The band had jammed on a riff. Nobody had even given it a proper title. Gillan says the tape box was labeled the Dun Dun song, that riff. Gillan and Roger Glover took the events they just lived through and turned them into lyrics. The fire, casino, Frank Zappa, the smoke. They'd sang it, finished the track just in time and put it on the record. Gillan's description of its status is almost unbelievable now. He called it a filler track, basically. And that should probably be the end of the story, except it wasn't. According to Gillan, Smoke on the Water didn't immediately become the song we now think of it as. About a year later, Warner Brothers' Russ Shaw saw Deep Purple perform and noticed the audience reaction to Smoke on the Water. Gillan says Shaw hadn't paid much attention to the song before that. He went back, had it edited down for radio, and the song began getting serious airplay. So even after the casino fire, after losing the original recording venue, after the improvised hotel sessions, after discovering they were 7 minutes short, after finding the dun-dun jam, and after writing the lyrics in a hurry, the song could still have disappeared as an album track. Gillan put it perfectly. At any point, the song could have failed. That's what changes Smoke on the Water for me. The riff feels like it was always inevitable now. It's so deeply embedded into rock music that imagining a world without it kind of feels impossible. But there was nothing inevitable about it. The song exists because of a strange chain of things going wrong. And a song they regarded as filler eventually became the song that would follow Deep Purple for the rest of their lives. There's also something wonderfully circular about the whole thing. The disaster disrupted the making of Machine Head. That disruption helped create the circumstances in which Deep Purple needed another song. And the song they wrote was about the disaster that had disrupted the making of Machine Head. So the next time you hear that riff, listen to what Ian Gillan is actually telling you. You're hearing one of rock's most famous songs, but you're also hearing a witness statement. A chaotic few days in Montreux, preserved forever. I've been Lewis, and this has been your second listen of Deep Purple.